It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Well, that didn't go quite as expected. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. It is our instant reaction podcast. It's so instant, Logan. We're still at FedEx Field.
I know. Look at it. It's kind of a nice view from here, too.
Yeah, nice.
Good job,
Maybe
Craig.
get a little bit more of the field. Oh, look, hey, green grass behind us. You love to see it. Green grass that the Buffalo Bills marched up and down all day long and just absolutely brutalized the Commanders ultimately on the scoreboard. I do think it's one of those games where, like, we have done a good job, I think, of joking on this podcast of how silly the turnover analysis is, right? Oh, turnovers. Yeah, good analysis, guy. Great key to the game.
Turnovers and explosives today.
And explosives, right. But today is a day that shows you why that is so important, because when you turn the ball over as much as Washington did, even if you go back and watch the tape and be like, I don't know, the process at times was better than the scoreboard would appear, it just shows why you have no hope and you ultimately lose 37-3.
Yeah, and, it's funny when we were doing the post game, it's like Mitch was all up in arms about the defense playing poorly. And I was like, I don't think they actually played that bad, because I think it's 17 unanswered points, right? From, 17 offensive points, or what I mean by that is like turnovers leading directly to scores. And like, that's just like not a tenable solution, kind of hold on and kind of prevent this really good offense from scoring. And then the offense throws a pick six. Whatever, there was a bunch of plays in there. So I don't know. I think the defense, there's a lot of positive things to glean from this performance. Offensively, I think it's kind of in that vein that you're talking about, right? Like, you can't evaluate it clearly because the turnovers are weighted so heavily.
Right. Yeah. I mean, turnovers ruin games where you otherwise execute fine. So, by the way, you get ruined by a drive where you're down at the 2-yard line and you can't punch it in. And, when we go back and watch the tape, like, we'll have a better idea, I think, on the midweek pod of exactly,
right.
All right, we'd like that play call, this is where it went wrong, all those kinds of things. Yeah. But I don't know, the defense is interesting to me because, so let's talk about that. Then we'll circle back to the offense. Absolutely. So the defense definitely gets put in a bad spot. I'll phrase it that way. By the offense on multiple occasions. And they do as good a job as you can on multiple occasions where they get the ball, Buffalo does, in field goal range. All of a sudden, Washington defense has to go back out there, short change, and they hold them to a field goal. There's one of those drives where I think they sent them backwards for an even longer field goal. It's like, hey, good job. I guess the only thing better could have been an actual turnover themselves. But I do think, like, the defensive line did not get pressure on Allen very much today. When they did not finish, and he was able to make that's where a lot of their explosive plays came from. So that's incredibly frustrating. They started 6 of 8 on third down. And there's drives where, well, yes, they're not giving up some bigger explosive plays. Like, Buffalo's on the field for 6, 8. There's one drive that's nearly 10 minutes long.
14 plays.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, how well is the defense really playing if you're saying, hey, earn it 3 yards at a time, and then they do?
Well, I think that's good defensive approach, because that drive ends up in 3 points, not a score, right? So I think, like, that's ultimately versus good team. That's ultimately what you're looking for. And, like, people are being critical of the defensive line, and so is Mitch. And I'm like, this is what good offensive game plans can do to even a dominant group, right? Lots of quick games, lots of screen, lots of bubble. And then I thought they did a really good job of kind of building a tendency within the game. And so what they did is they'd bring in their heavy personnel. Number 76 is reporting is eligible. He's eligible. That means they're going to run the ball. And then probably 3 or 4 of their explosive plays come out of that package, right? They're taking shots down the field. The pass protection's better. The lanes to the receiver are better. And so, again, like, if I'm thinking, they're bringing this heavy guy in to run the football, I'm not going to rush the passer as effectively. And they were in shorts, like, they were backed up situation. One was in the end zone. They're playing the run hard. Like, of negating, like, we saw this a couple years ago. I think it was 2020 or 2021 when they played the LA Chargers in the first game of the year. Like, Joe Lombardi did an excellent job. Screens, quick games, short intermediate passing attack, play action. And it makes it impossible for the rusher to get in a rhythm and to get a feel for how the tackle's setting. And we talked about Spencer Brown, how he'd been struggling coming into this game. But the more film I watched on him, I was like, he's getting insulated a ton by the offensive play caller. And I think you saw that a lot
2 weeks in a row, by the way. They did a really good job. Spencer Brown, the right tackle for Buffalo, was productive last week against Max Crosby. This week, you don't really hear much from either of the edge guys.
And that's not even including, like, we just talked about kind of schematically what they did. But in addition to that, they're also bringing chip help. They're also flaring backs in specific ways. And it just makes it really hard for the rush to get home. So you're going to have games like this where your most effective group on the field can't be productive. And I think this is ultimately what Jack wants to be from a defensive standpoint. Yeah, go on a 14-play drive. Who cares if it ends in 3 points? Because we're trusting that our offense is going to go down and score points. And the very next sequence, Sam throws an interception. So they're back on the field. And all of that kind of defensive approach and defensive philosophy of bending but not breaking just comes back and bites you in the ass. So I think that's what I take away from this game. I'm like, everything went about, I don't say as well as it could have gone for the defense, but it kind of fit within the box that they wanted it to fit in. And the offense just couldn't support them. Right. And maybe that's my offensive bias. I don't know, but
maybe I think there's undoubtedly some shreds of truth to that, if not a lot more than shreds. Let's be clear. Like, he's a very smart fellow over here. I think there's more than shreds to that. And when you have a pick six, like when you have again,
what drives, a great play by that guy. By the way.
Yeah, I know Epinesa, that's sick. But like you have a drive where you give up points, but you send the offense backwards. Like. Yeah. Those types of things you can't put on the defense. But if you want to be here would be my but.
Yeah.
If you want to be elite, you got to make plays. And making plays in this game could have been interception. Cam Curl has one go through his hands.
They had an interception. Fuller had an interception.
Yeah.
They had the 4th and 2 that they stopped, right? Ball batted. So I think when you look back at the sequence, right, obviously there's the one that Cam drops, which everyone goes, oh, my gosh, because that ended up being an explosive play the other way. But I think, like, they did an okay job.
Well, I was going to say the next thing in that list, though, would be finish plays that are there. Like you've done so much of the work, on the first drive of the game. Like Josh Allen is dead to rights. He's able to get free, and he makes a big explosive play down the field. Or, you let him out on your first big third down. He scrambles for a first down. I think it was 3rd and 10. Like, you've set yourself up for success. You've gotten in 3rd and long. You put yourself in position. You got to finish plays. And I think that on the defensive side, to me, that's the big critique for today. But I think you're correct that overall, if you want to be honest about it, even in a game where you look at the score 37-3, like of that 37, there's a reasonable amount of points given up and a reasonable amount of yardage by a defense against an offense that's as good.
You think he had 217 yards passing? It wasn't like he crushed today. It wasn't like a huge number. If I might be mistaken, but like
they give up. Let's see, 20 first downs total. That's 9 of 15 on third down is a killer.
Yeah, I think that's what I would
and then total yards, they give up 386, 168 on the ground, 218 through the air.
Yeah, so 218 isn't a bad number, and I think some of that comes in garbage time. Obviously, I have that late toss sweep to Cooks that ends up being like a 34-yard gain.
The rushing yardage is
so
a little higher.
I think that's a little bit skewed, but. So what I'd say is that, like, overall, like, there was a point in the third quarter where it's 16-0, and the offense has the ball. And I was like, this, for how bad the offense has played so far, the defense has kept them in it. And then Gibson fumbles, and they go down and score. And then obviously, to me, that's where the game kind of shifts. But think about it. If they get down and they just say, hey, we're going to possess the football a little bit, even if they go on like a 4 or 5, 6, 7 play drive there, I think the complexion of this game is completely different. It's just
you have a chance.
How quickly they would turn the ball over.
Yeah, the Gibson fumbles on the first play of the series.
Yeah, and I'm not going to – I know people are going to get all over Gibson, but I appreciate what Gibson's trying to do there. And I've been that guy, right? You get the ball on the screen, you break a tackle, you make a guy miss, you're in a pile. Don't make it it doesn't need to be a home run on this play. Like, go down and live to play another day. And I appreciate his effort, I appreciate his focus, but you got to protect the football. And that's what happens when offenses are straining. And I felt like the offense was straining a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It was straining and struggling as opposed to just saying, like, hey, like, let's slow this down. Let's bring our tempo way down and get our defense off the field and call them, I don't want to say more conservative game plan but that's kind of that's the word that comes to mind.
So let's get into the offense, because that's really, I think, where this game is won, or in the Commanders' case, lost. Sam has 4 picks. Some of them are like tremendous individual efforts. He took a lot of blame for them afterwards.
I thought he did a great job at his presser, by the way.
Yeah, no, I did too. And I asked him, I don't know if you heard the question I asked him at the end about trust.
Yeah.
And he talked
you were trying to get that boy caught up.
Well, no, I was curious because it was a word that came up a bunch in the locker room, like Terry's the trust of, we gotta make sure he can trust us to be at the right splits and be at the right depths and be at this place. So like the word started bouncing around, and so I wanted to ask Sam about it. That wasn't me trying to like get him or anything.
But I remember listening to that question. I was like, "Oh, Craig's getting spicy."
But I was just like, are you at a point where when you're sitting back there in the pocket, not like, oh, I emotionally trust Terry or intellectually, but like, I know if I let this ball rip, that dude's going to be where he's supposed to be. And like, that's something that with more reps, you become more comfortable. By the end of their careers, like Brady could throw to Gronk blind.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by the question.
But I think he gave a good answer.
Yeah, he gave a great answer.
Yeah. And I think he does trust his guys. And and even if he doesn't, like the maturity to kind of say, like, hey, I trust everybody, but the protection, the play caller.
I think the fact that he singled out EB is like, hey, this is a guy that I trust to give me a good plan. Like that to me was great. And what I thought, and by the way, I don't think he's BSing. I think he was incredibly genuine with it, where he's like, look, we have all this stuff all this work that we've put in.
Yeah.
And we're not going to throw it away because we had one bad game. That said, I actually don't think this is obviously Bieniemy's best today. When you look at the kind of the flow of the game, some of the stuff you're just talking about with the defense needing to get off the field, and just the sheer numbers. There's a long stretch in this game where Brian Robinson, I just kept looking down at the stat sheet, and he's 10 carries for 70 yards. I'm not great at math, but when they end in a 0, it becomes a lot easier. That's a 7-yard average. They're averaging like 8-1 total as a team per carry, and they cannot throw the ball.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's still 16-0. You're not scoreboard wise completely out of the game.
Yeah.
And I think that is an area where if we ask EB on Thursday, do you wish you maybe would have gone to the run a little bit more? He's probably going to say, like, it's easy to say in hindsight, yes, some answer like that. But deep down in his soul, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. No, I had something similar happen to me when I was calling a high school game recently. And high school is way different than the NFL. But it was 14-13. There was 2-minute situation, and the quarterback was a little bit unsettled. But I was like, we're going to go for it. We're going to see if we can make this happen. He throws a pick six. We get the ball coming out at halftime, and I was like, okay, we can still go. And I didn't have the wherewithal at the time to be like, we need to just possess the football and slow this.
You get caught up in the emotions of the game.
And I felt like there were times, and again, I'm probably projecting a little bit, but I felt like there were times in this game where he was like, we need to be aggressive. I need to be aggressive. And that's who he is, and that's what we love about him. But also, I think this is where like the maturity of an inexperienced play caller comes to the forefront. And Andy Reid does the same thing, and Kyle does the same thing. So it's not just these guys that are high octane offensive minds. They always want to be scoring points. They always be aggressive. But I will say, like, look at Kyle Shanahan against the Giants, right? He was perfectly content this Monday night game of just running the football, or Thursday night, whatever that game was, of just running the football, bleeding the clock, and letting playmakers make plays for him, right? And I felt like there was a time in this game where it was like, we need to take the foot off the gas a little bit, reset our thought process, reset our approach. And when they came out at halftime, I thought they were doing that. They ran the ball well. They got down in the red zone. It's 1st and goal, I want to say, right? And then they throw that interception. And I look at that and I say to myself, like, gosh, you don't need to take and it's so easy for me. And I don't want to be sound like I'm critical of him, because it's so incredibly hard to call plays. It's so hard to call plays with something you like, something you thought was good in the week, and then it ends up being an interception. And then think about it would have been 7-13 at that point, which think about the complexion of the game, And so I'm sure EB's beating himself up over it, but I thought there were times where I'm like, hey man, just let's keep it nice and slow, keep it nice and steady, and you don't need to press quite so much. But again, that's so easy for us to say sitting here after the game.
Sure, 100% acknowledge that. Yeah. Ultimately, like, that's our job, to sit here. It's his job to call plays. Right. So I think within that context,
but I think let me just say this. I think we have a lot of respect for EB. We love what he's done with the team, and like 100%. This is one potential learning experience. And I don't want to sound like we're being. I guess what I'm saying, I don't want to sound like we're being overly critical of him in an incredibly.
Well, I think situation. You can be critical. I mean, we don't need to debate the merits of our jobs 100%. And the philosophical level, but I think you can be critical in the same way that they're self-critical without being like, he needs to be fired. Yeah. He needs to whatever. Like, no one's saying that. Or like, are there fans on Twitter that are saying that you should bench Sam Howell? Of course, because it's fans on Twitter. Yeah. But that's nuts. And like, we are going to criticize Sam Howell within the context of, this is what he missed. This is what he should have done. Yeah. This is how he gets better. And I think the same with Bieniemy. I think one of the hardest things about being an OC in this league is you spend so much time during the week preparing. Yeah. And you come up with a game plan that you really, really like. Yeah. And then maybe even on the sideline, you're looking at the pictures and you're like, man, if we can just get a little more protection, it's there. You go to your O-line and like, guys, we need to give him an extra tick. Andrew Wiley afterwards said, we need to elevate our play. We need to give Sam that tick longer because we think that there's stuff there. Yeah. And you convince yourself that instead of dealing with the circumstances as they are, that you are just getting a little bit luckier or slightly better play away from unlocking the thing that you work so hard on all week. 100%. And I think that is probably to a large extent what happened today with Bieniemy is he's like, I know this defense. We played it so often when I was in Kansas City. I know what they're trying to do. I see it. They're not doing anything we're not expecting. I have this plan that I know works. Why isn't it working? And instead, what he should have done, again, with the extreme benefit of hindsight and trying to be fair, is he should have looked at the game situation as it was, seen the protection issues, seen the success running the ball, and just continued to do that because that's what was working today. Yeah,
I agree. And I think there's an element of like, as a play caller, even when I was watching the game, I was like, he's all right, he's run the ball twice, he needs to throw the ball. But there's no, like, that's like, as a play caller, the way I'm thinking about it, right? And you don't have to do that. Right. It's first down. Do whatever the hell you want. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to throw a slant, but you could also run that counter again that hit for a big play. Like, so I think there's like this rhythm as a play caller you get into, and sometimes it's so hard to just kind of, again, like you're saying, like, take a step back and be like, wait. Like, no, I don't need it. Like, based on game flow now, it's completely different than what I thought. I've experienced that. You put something in, it looks great all week. It should look great. It's there on film. It's there on the sideline copy. And when you run it, it's a sack or a fumble, whatever it is, and you're just like, and it's maddening because of the prep you put in. So I agree. It's just it's so easy when you're not 3 inches from your face, and we're watching up from here in the press box. We can tell, but that would be one thing. I'd be interested to get his thoughts on that, if he felt that he could have handled that or managed that differently based on stuff that we saw in the game.
For sure. All right. What about Sam? Rough day, obviously. It's a rough day at the office. The question is, when we start signing blame or, fault, whatever you want to call it, like, how much of it is on him? And I think the other thing that I'm saying this for the second straight week, like, we need to go back and look at the tape and understand is, are there options down the field available? Yeah. Because when you are sitting in the pocket that long, I feel like there has got to be an element that you just feel like there's no one open. I know for a fact on one, there was one of the sacks that I saw that I was able to have a pretty good view of the field and receivers. And like, so at least one, there ain't nobody open. Yeah. There's some, Wiley gets beat on a speed rush on one. That's pretty obvious. Like, that's on Andrew Wiley. But then there's 7 more sacks to account for, Logan, and those are kind of the defining parts of his day outside the interceptions, some of which kind of go together, though, because obviously they're not sacks on plays that are picks, but there are pressures on a lot of them.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like, this offense is kind of built on a specific game flow, and even though they throw the ball a lot, they do kind of walk this line of being able to say, we can get to a screen, we can get to a draw, we can get to a run, and kind of quiet the pass rush a little bit, or get to a quick game even. So, and I just felt like they got in a position where it felt a little bit rushed, felt a little bit frantic, and everything was looking for a chunk play, or at least that's what it felt like watching. And again, when we watch the film, we'll probably feel differently and be able to give different analysis on it. But I think there were times, like the first interception Sam threw, I thought he is hunting for this big play. And,
it's 3rd and 19, like, understandable to an extent.
And, we might be assigning this kind of frenetic feeling to EB when it's the quarterback who feels like he's competing with Josh Allen, and like, there's a check down right in his line of view. Just check the ball down, man. Like, it's not a perfect situation, but you have an opportunity to get a field goal. It would have been 3-10 at that point, or 3-3. I don't remember the exact score, but I think about moments like that and I say, you don't need to do that. Or the thing he said in his press conference, and I love that he owned this. He was like, on the interception to the flat, he doesn't hear the protection call, and that's what happens with a young quarterback.
Yeah, or you said they called the protection wrong. There's a free runner that, like, they knew there was going to be a free runner. The guy who was free was not the guy who was expecting, and instead of throwing it in the dirt,
because the way I understood is they made like a different call at the line of scrimmage that he didn't hear or something. Yeah, there was a communication issue, and he owned that too. Yeah. But I think, like, those are the types of things you experience with young quarterbacks, and I mentioned this with B. Mitch on the postgame show. He's still a young player, and he's going to miss those calls. Like, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, they don't miss those calls, but they've also been doing it for 1,000 years. So it like makes it easier to make sure you're owned in on those details.
Good time to remind folks that the all-time, I think this is still true, but it was forever, the all-time leader in interceptions in someone's rookie season was a guy named Peyton Manning, who turned out quite all right. Yeah. So, like, there's going to be moments where you see the special stuff. You're going to see, the mobility, for instance, some of these runs. I mean, he's pretty slippery as a ball carrier.
Oh, he is,
And so there's stuff like that you really like. By the same token, there is obviously a lot of learning to do. Yep. And I think learning in the NFL for Sam, based on the mistakes that he's made so far, a lot of that is going to be, what can you get away with and what do you need to just eat? And he hasn't learned to eat it yet. And part of that is because occasionally he gets away with extending the play and doing something great. That's a good point. In some ways, the touchdown he throws down here in this corner in week 1 is a bad thing because he's like, oh, cool. If I roll out and I can loft a little ball in between 6 guys and get a touchdown, like that's good. I know how to do this in the NFL. And then, it was 3rd, 4th interception, the one where he rolls left and he sees Jahan and he probably should just eat it, run it, whatever. Really, honestly, that's one where I had a pretty good view of it. Jahan's got a block there.
Oh,
where
which one was that? That was,
he tries to flip the ball. Like they're kind of running parallel 5 yards apart. Sam's rolling left. And I think instead of Jahan trying to sneak out and have Sam lofted over, actually it was the pick 6. Where Epinesa, if Jahan just is like, all right, I'm going to block this dude and let Sam run, I think that's actually a better outcome. Obviously, it would have been better. That the worst possible outcome happened. But, it's things like that where it's like, do I just throw it at Jahan's feet? Do I, or like, do I have to loft it higher? Like, what does that making that play look like? He doesn't know yet because he's been in the NFL now for 4 games. And that's going to be the learning process of a young quarterback.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like the one thing that I loved about his press conference is that he just was like, tomorrow's the sun's going to come up. And this is the only reason this is a loss or this is a bad loss is if nothing is learned from it. So if like he doesn't grow, the protection doesn't get better, the scheme doesn't change, there's not an evolution. And I felt like, at least from his comments, like, and it runs too for that matter, that there was an understanding that we have to get better after a performance like this and we have to improve. And, like having been in bad losses before, like that's literally all you can do. That's like all you can do is just kind of say, hey, we got knocked out, we got hit in the face, but I got to stand up and we got to get ready for Philly, which is coming up in, however many days, 7 days or whatever. So I think that's kind of my approach here. And I'm happy to hear, even if it's just words, I'm happy to hear that was kind of the consensus, at least in Ron and Sam's presser.
Yeah, no, the locker room, much of the same, and it emptied out pretty quick. A lot of guys weren't real interested in talking after this one. But your leaders, or at least I don't know if John actually talked, whatever that's worth.
I bet he was not. He doesn't strike me as the guy who talk after a game like this.
Yeah, no, not super psyched. I'm sure he'll do the locker room talk or not talk criticism. But Terry talked for a while, and a guy that I'll give a lot of credit to for stepping up and talking is Andrew Wiley.
Did he?
Because it's one of those things where you're in there and you're listening, and you start to tweet a quote, and you're like, well, this is going to set my mentions on fire. The second you mention Andrew Wiley, people are like, that guy sucks. Yeah. And it's like, he's had some bad football this year because he is an average NFL
He's an average NFL right tackle.
Sometimes on average, or to be average, you have to win some, you have to lose some. And that is the nature of things. But he talked about we're going to own it as an offensive line. Sam talked about owning it. Yeah. Terry, I was kind of boxed out from the gigantic scrummer on him, but to the extent that I could hear, he was talking about owning the receivers part in it. So, Gibson talked about, his fumble, and he's like, obviously I got to be better. I got to hold on to the football.
That's tough, man. Those are the worst interviews after a game. Like when you've had a bad game and it's like, I had personally had a bad game, but now I got to talk about. Yeah. So I have a lot of sympathy for that, man. That's really hard.
Yeah. And so what I like is everybody is taking ownership. There's not finger pointing. And I still think my favorite thing that anyone said was Sam, when he was like, hey, do you flush this? And Ron was asked a similar question and also answered similarly. But it's like, no, you learn from it. Yeah. And the only way that this makes us better is if we actually sit down and don't just like push it away and pretend it never happened and try to move forward, is if we actually sit down, see where the mistakes are, learn from it, because you have a very good Philly team coming up, which brings us back to the measuring stick notion. Logan. So if this was a measuring stick game, what'd you learn? Because you clearly did not measure up based off the final scoreboard.
I felt like it showed some of the potential issues with the team. Obviously, young quarterback, new play caller, and we have to watch film to kind of finalize that analysis. But the state of the offensive line, if it got to have it passing situations, is not probably where you want it to be. But we knew that coming in, and most offensive lines are not built that way. They're not built to kind of pass the ball 50 times in a game. They're just not. But, what happens when we're in those situations? How do we prepare for that if we have to do that? Defensively, defensive line specifically, how do we maximize those pressures versus a mobile quarterback versus this type of game plan? Can we give tools from a Jack Del Rio perspective to kind of maximize those group pressures, stunts, run stunts, whatever it may be? And so, again, I think it's a good measuring stick because it shows you where some weaknesses are in the team and in the roster construction, but it also lets you say, well, hey, we can maybe be a little bit more creative in certain situations with our pressure packages or our coverage disguises or whatever it may be to help maximize that. Or like I said, the protection, the run to pass ratio, whatever we could do to insulate that offensive line. So I think that's kind of what I'd say from a measuring stick standpoint, because that Bills team's excellent. They're a good team. Good. The defense is very good. The offense is good. They've got one of the best players, quarterbacks in the league. So they showed us, hey man, like when you're running with the big dogs, you got to do things at a different level. So.
Yeah, no, I that's where I take out of it is like, okay, this defensive line, do I think they're all of a sudden are not very good? No, but like if you're going to face a truly elite offense and play like this, that's not good enough to be elite. Like that's the measuring stick, right? Like if you thought you were I guess I would put it this way for the D line specifically. Yeah. If you thought you already made it, not quite. Yeah. Not that you're not capable of better, not that you're not capable of more, but like this is elite. And so if you want to dominate against that group, you got to be better.
And also I think the other thing I'd like to point out there is game flow. Yeah. The game flow in this game is one where you're playing from behind. And I think you see the importance of an offense that can kind of push that game flow, to a higher level, right? When they're playing with a lead, the Commanders are playing with a lead, that defensive line can hunt. Like you see it in Arizona, you see it against the
Broncos.
Yeah. Thank you. So,
by the way, what a day for them.
Yeah, the tough day for them. But what I am saying is that like that is where complementary football comes into play here. The defensive line cannot win you a Super Bowl by itself. The defense needs the secondary, they need the linebackers, they need the offense to be productive. And if the offense is productive, like we just discussed, this team's in a much better position. So I think those are the things that really stick out to me in terms of how I would measure this, and areas that I say, hey, they can improve in these areas and they will improve in these areas because like we talked about, like this is a very young football team at some very important positions.
Yes. In summary, turnovers, bad. Explosive plays, good for you, bad for them. And you do need both sides of the ball, and they do interact with each other in a major way.
I mean, really, that's what this game comes down to.
And what game does it? It's just you see the repercussions if they go badly for you. All right, that'll do for the instant reaction show here on Take Command. We'll be back Wednesday morning with or Tuesday afternoon on YouTube, Wednesday morning in the audio feed. With the film breakdown. Of course, I'll be on the radio all week long, starting at 4 o'clock tomorrow for the Hoffman show. 4 o'clock, our 1st and 10. Do not be late. 10 observations from this football game. Although when I say it like that, Logan, from this football game, I feel like some people might want to be late because yikes. All right. Other than that, thanks for listening to Take Command. Subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now if you have not, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.